Welcome back to the 14th Jaipur Literature Festival here at Diggy Palace front lawn, protected by Dettol. Our session today is Reflections, Anish Kapoor in conversation with Homi K. Bhabha. Anish Kapoor has succeeded in transforming the cool, conceptual and minimal approach to sculpture by adding lyricism, metaphor and the heat of the primordial. Objects spill out from their own parameters, yet they also stand serenely as in meditative focus, as if for ritual. Typically, the sculptures appear abstract, with Kapoor's intention to promote self-reflection made most obvious when using mirrored surfaces. He does not wish to present a prescriptive idea, but instead to create an environment within which people themselves can consider meaning. As the viewer becomes part of the sculpture, each work speaks of the confined individuality of a single body, but also of the expansive inclusiveness of a shared place. His sculptures paradoxically entwine esoteric philosophy with sensual everyday experience. In this session, one of India's greatest artists talks about his life and work with his friend Homi K. Bhabha. Anish Kapoor is considered one of the most influential sculptors working today. Recent solo exhibitions include Houghton Hall, Norfolk, UK, the Pitzhanger Manor, London, and the Serralves Museo de Arte Contemporánea, Porto. Permanent commissions include Cloudgate for the Millennium Park in Chicago, Orbit for the London 2012 Olympic Park, and Ark Nova 2013, the world's first inflatable mobile concert hall in Japan. Kapoor represented Britain at the 44th Venice Biennale, for which he was awarded the Premio Duemila and won the Turner Prize in 1991. 2013, he received a knighthood for his services to the arts. Homi K. Bhabha is the Anne F. Rothenberg Professor of the Humanities in the English and Comparative Literature departments at Harvard University. He was founding director of the Mahindra Humanities Center at Harvard University from 2011 to 2019, and the director of the Harvard Humanities Center from 2005 to 2011. Bhabha is the author of numerous works exploring post-colonial theory, culture, change and power, contemporary art and cosmopolitanism. Please do remember to comment by typing it into the comment section below. Ladies and gentlemen, Reflections, Anish Kapoor in conversation with Homi K. Bhabha.
Thank you, Sanjoy, and thank you, Jaipur Literature Festival, which is a celebration of the arts and ideas. Thank you, Anish, for being here. We are at now a great distance from each other. I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and you're in Oxfordshire. And yet, as you know, we burn the phone lines every day, so this is only part of a continued conversation. I thought that we would talk about several of the moments and moods in your work, looking each time at a particular practice. And roughly, I thought we might move from the void works, which you are so associated, the notion of the dark, disorienting void, move on to the mirror works, and then talk about these great works with wax that you've been making. Let's start with the void works. I've written something briefly to introduce our conversation. I tag it to Descent into Limbo, 1992. The infinite dark depth of psychic interiority, located in a confined space, a stone, an edifice, a box, in which the viewer enters to find that she faces a void of vulnerability from which there is no release. You are not drawn into sculptural place before which you stand as you traditionally do before objects of art, facing the work. Here there is only the power of effacement, the gravitational pull of the disappearance of body and personhood. The challenge of the work is more fundamental than interpretation or identification. The void itself mirrors nothing. The enigma is this: can you face this experience on the edge of art and anxiety? Can you confront this liminal space? How long can you survive the experience of being invited in, framed with no narcissistic affirmation of an object that looks back at you? Can you stand still before a work to which there is no end and no beginning, but there is an infinite moment of being transformed by the process of waiting? These works are not about ascent or descent. They demand that you hold on to a level of scale, of sight, like a classical musician holds on to a pitch or note that extends till you consciously hear it no longer. But the entire structure of the piece or the sculpture depends on the tension by which your ear or your eye bend to it, and yet you resist to let it overwhelm you. These are works of a passivity in a limbo that is infinitely precarious. Keep your balance, they say. You are waiting for yourself to return from the void. Waiting is now part of the spatial dimension of sculpture itself. The limits of time are explored in the volume of form and material. In order to experience it, the work asks you to wait, to confront your own vulnerability within the presence of the void. So that, Anish, is my meditation, my reflection, to echo the title of the session, on these void works. And I thought we might use it as a starting point to open our talk today.
My dear Hermie, dear all involved, all here, Sanjoy, thank you. Hermie, what a marvelous reflection. Wait. Wait, not act, not step, wait. It's if you like, sitting on that, to use your word, liminal edge between doing and not doing, between even being and not being. Allow me to first just describe to those who don't know this work what's happening. So the work, as you'll see in the pictures, is a building about 6 meters cubed, which you enter. In the floor is what appears to be, or rather on the floor, is what appears to be a black carpet. It is in fact a deep, deep, dark void filled with blackness. So black that it appears as if it is a non-existent object, a space full of darkness. I think that's key. The phenomenological question is key. So much so that the first time I showed this work, somebody went into the room and said, "I don't believe this, can't be so." Took his glasses off, believe it or not, and threw them down to prove somehow that it couldn't be so. And then was taken aback, hugged the walls. You know, the last time I showed this work, not so long ago, someone so didn't believe it, in spite of the fact that he'd been warned, that he jumped in. Sad, he hurt himself, sad fellow. But anyway, there you go. So this sense of the edge, the darkness that consumes, the darkness that isn't empty, that's full, is what I'm toying with. The title for the work comes from the work of art that I, at least, perhaps even admire most anywhere ever made, if one can dare to say such a thing, and that is Mantegna's Descent into Limbo. Thing painted when? I can't even remember when. Doesn't matter when. Anyway, and what is, it's an image in which Christ has a staff in his hand. He's wearing a red shirt, and he's got one leg forward, rather like a Giacometti sculpture, one leg forward, about to enter a cave, a dark descent. So this is not Dante's limbo in immersion. This is on the edge of limbo, about to act. And I think this is where your waiting idea is so poignant. The cave, of course, as we know from Freud, is, of course, the place of beginning, the place of end, the place of ritual, the place of magic. An inscape in which, if you like, at least according to me, mountain, woman, human, animal, darkness, sexuality are all one. So what am I saying? I'm saying limbo sits there in this place. Forgive me for going on, but one more thought. And that is, of course, works like Descent into Limbo and the other void works are about this edge, which you and I, Homi dear, have talked about in the past. But they're also about the idea that the object has no status. In other words, the non-object becomes or lives, becomes real, it's a fiction, it's a poetic gesture, it's a possibility. I'm fascinated by the idea that the more I investigate objects, the more I realize that the object is completely illusory, and it is a fictional reality that we keep building somewhere between, it used to be that this so-called illusion was a bad word. I say completely the opposite. In fact, the illusion, the illusory in poetics is where deep reality lives, because we ourselves come into the illusory constantly, keep bumping into it, and can't seem to fix on reality. I mean, look at the state of the world today, just as an aside.
Anish, I do want to just come in at the end of what you said, because I think that there is a difference between illusion, as you talked about it, and strategic misrepresentation as we have it in the world today. And indeed, one of the interesting things is that this misrepresentation often deals with illusory objects. I mean, there are prime ministers who resort to caves, to great mystical places, while the pandemic rages, in order to ask the gods to intervene.
Indeed.
There are other politicians who also resort to illusory figures, like Mexican migrants being murderers, and create those illusions. But I want to go, so I just had to say that just to make a distinction. But I want to go back.
It's important to say that, Hermie, and to speak loudly of our refusal of, if you like, fictional unrealities that purport to be real. Now, art, of course, operates in a slightly parallel universe, very slightly.
Yeah, so I want to get back to something, because I do see the difference between the way in which you represent the question of, or the object of illusion. The object is present because it is enigmatic. The object is present. You are a maker of objects. Whatever illusions are also part of it. And this is very different from the kind of virtual objects that we now see on screens. The reason why the tension in the work exists, the reason why waiting as a kind of site of vulnerability, an edge of vulnerability, is important, is because people enter this place and, as you described, throw their spectacles in. They don't believe it. So in a way, there is a play of materiality and illusionality in the works that you make. They have a big, massive presence. They do satisfy the greed of the eye, the appetite of the eye, while also eluding it. And I think that's a tension that is very difficult to maintain in illusory virtual objects as you see them these days in a digital space. And I think we need to make that. But I wanted to ask you about something.
Go on. Okay, you go on. I have something to say about that.
So no, if you have to say something here, you should come in straight away.
I think I want to say that it's not just about, if you like, the illusory darkness out there. Parallel to it is, without a doubt, the eyes turned inward. The illusory or not so illusory darkness in me, in you, in all of us. And I think that, if you like, homing in to what I possess, what I recognize as my own inner fear. I'm of course talking about the Kantian sublime. I'm talking about the idea that in the object of infinity, which is after all what deep, darkness is, there is the profound terror of the loss of self, being consumed by, I'm closing my eyes while I say this, but being consumed by the darkness in me. Now, Yves Klein, you know who I mean, the artist who painted endlessly marvelous, wonderful, visionary, monochrome blue canvases, made a photo montage in which he leaps off the side of a building as if into the void. Now, I have issues with that because what it talks of is the fearless leap into the unknown. No, I say, no, Mr. Klein, I cannot agree with this. It is not fearless. It is much more like Apollinaire's, I quoted incorrectly, I'm sure, but Apollinaire's go to the edge, I'll push you, and you'll see if you can fly. So that terror of the unknown, of the dark interior, exterior space. So it's not just illusion, I think, is where I'm coming back to. It's a recognition somewhere between the phenomenological and the inwardly perceived.
Yeah, well, that's precisely what I was saying, so that it's on the edge of both the object as present and the illusion. So I think that without that tension, things don't work. And this is why I started off by talking about a psychic interiority which waits in the world. And I think you have to have that, both those things working at the same time. I was wondering now whether we might shift our focus to the mirror works in your practice, which I think are, you know, very well known, and you've been making them for a long time. And I thought, because I'm so familiar with them, that I should actually, again, write a short piece about them just to initiate our discussion. And the work that I had in mind was principally Cloudgate, which is in Chicago, but also a number of other mirror works. And I think the text, my text, is a kind of metaphor that covers many aspects of this practice. The mirror works throw you into another kind of limbo. People stand before Cloudgate or other mirror works to see themselves in a mirror, a distorted mirror, a disfiguring mirror. In any case, it is always an affirmation of a form of narcissism. The narcissistic instinct is not a negative instinct. It is the desire for self-reflection. It can actually be pushed to the extreme of solipsism But it can also be a way in which you place yourself in a certain space. You see your face. After all, it's very difficult to see your face with your own eyes. This is always a mediated experience, and you do not have eyes at the back of your head. So in a way, a mirror places you both in terms, it's both before you and it is after you, and it gives you a kind of as close as you can get to that view from both sides of yourself. But when you stand before a mirror, there is always this sense, there by the grace of God go I. There by the grace of God I am here, however displaced I am, however disfigured I am. It is a sign of one's presence and one's doubles. The mirror is an early morning affirmation of whom you are and where you are. The mirror frames you in time and space, which is why it is often at the very foundation of portrait painting. Cloudgate is a different kind of mirror. Like your other mirror works, the surface of light and reflection is a ruse. Once you're drawn into the mirror work, like Freud's dream work, the self is decomposed, disseminated across a surface that flows like mercury, and looking back at yourself does not allow you to fix yourself in reflection. You lose your foothold in your fixedness, because there is no I to this mirror. There is an I, a visual orifice, but there is no I. The mirror is also a kind of void. Like a dream, you are in limbo. You are depth and surface. You are the image of yourself and its infinite extension and transitions. There is no containment or easy contentment. Like in a dream, you are both subject and object of the experience and all the other parts and pasts in between. These mirror works are about an effort, in my view, at a recovery of the self, not the representation of the self, a recovery even from the void that we were just speaking of. You rise and fall in a mirror. You wake and return to the dream scene, in and out, possessed and dispossessed. In the life of art, death is never extinction. Death is the extension of the afterbirth as a source of living on in some shape or form, yet to be decided. Art is eternal, they say, because its life already belongs partly to death. This is the kind of estranging mirror moment Freud describes in his essay, The Uncanny. In the middle of the night, Freud sees himself, glances at himself as he's passing a mirror, and he asks, who is this old man? What is he doing here? Of course, this is me ventriloquizing Freud. These are not exactly the questions he asks. The mirror works are experiments with the risk of time in the recovery, not reflection, of persons and things caught in the skin of the mirror's surface and depth. Here today, gone tomorrow, and that, if I may impersonate the voice of Cloudgate, and that, says Cloudgate, goes for you who search ceaselessly for yourself in the mirror of life or the mirror of the world.
Bravo. Beautiful, my dear, dear, dear. Art and death. I like this alto poetic phrase, the way you put it, that art holds death in every moment, good art in any case, and therefore is in eternal return. Of course, that connects quite strongly with Freud and the unheimlich, the uncanny, falsely translated. Unheimlich, I think, my German's not very good, but I think means unhomely. And unhomely, of course, is this, view over there at something which is and isn't and has that sense of the real unreal. Sculpture, let me once again start by being perfectly practical. The mirror in sculpture has long been a reality. You know, since the Etruscans or the early Chinese and before then. But they were always convex forms like this, solid forms with a mirrored surface. Now, what that does, just as a matter of reality, is it gives you the world upright, convex form, or a flat form, gives you the world upright, and it reduces, especially convex form, reduces the scale of what is shown on the surface. In the 17th century, in science, there was the concave mirror, this shape. And concavity turns the world upside down, first of all. So almost every work I've made, and Cloudgate is possibly at least part of Cloudgate is an exception, but almost every work I've made is with concave form. What it does is turn the world upside down, and astonishingly, it fills this space, this space, this space. It fills it with mirroredness. This is where I came to it from. I'm not really that interested in the mirror itself, but this space full of mirror, how bizarre. It's a bizarre visual phenomena. And furthermore, may I say that because it's concave like this, the physics is that depending on this curvature, it has a focal length. And the focal length is somewhere out here. So there's this almost mystical point in space where the world turns upside down. This object is standing here, but looks that way there, looks upside down there. And it does this weird thing at this point. And once you cross it, it crosses over again. Now, think about painting. Painting, all painting, I'm going to dare to say, is a flat surface, and from it, you go deep into space, into the space behind the painting. The moment you put a concave mirror like this on the wall, what it does is say, no longer is the space of painting there, it's here. Some fundamental transformation has occurred. It brings, if you like, the space of sublimity into the active space of the viewer. And what's more, it's vertiginous. It says that the moment you cross that point of focal length here, you're actually falling into the object. So I think phenomenologically fascinating. So what I've been doing over the last many years, I think it's radical, we'll see, is painting these concave surfaces. Painting them, treating them almost like painting. So they operate between these two spaces, between the space of the flat and beyond, and the space of the curved and forward. And somewhere in there is a tension that I dare to think has something of the unheimlich about it, has something of the disturbingly, go away, switch off, I don't want to look at you. Why are you bothering me? This idea of the object that won't go away. Allow me, dear Omi, to say one more thing, which is in relation to Cloudgate. When I first made it, which was in 2000, before the selfie, I want to say, before the selfie, and I think that's important. When it was first went on show, there were thousands of people there, and it really bothered me because, it's wonderful to make a work that has a popular view, but I'm not into entertainment. I'm not interested in entertainment. So I decided I'd go to Chicago. You were living in Chicago at the time, my dear Homie. I don't know if you remember this, but I came along and we walked, and then I spent some time with the object. And I sat and pondered, what is this popularity? Why is it like this? And, you know, why am I bothered by it? And then I began to observe that this was an object which had a shifting scale. It has no joints. So it's one thing with no joints. Everything we look at in the world, especially of size, a big object, everything has a joint. And that gives your body measure. This has no measure. You're close to it and it's an enormous thing. You go a little bit away, it's not so enormous. And this thing of the shifting scale is truly deeply mysterious. Just as a small aside, the last time I visited Chicago, three years ago, whatever, it had 200 million visitors, which is a good number, I think. And they tell me that 200 million visitors is 500 million selfies. Interesting, just because in a way it's a pre-selfie object. It's an object that's turned into this, take a picture of yourself jumping up or doing whatever it is that people do. Weird, I don't know how I feel about that, but anyway, there it is.
You know, the selfie, of course, is an exuberant, spontaneous act, but it is a great act of narcissism. I was talking to Wim Wenders, who said if anybody had told him 50 years ago that people would be pointing the lens more this way than that, he would never have believed it.
Yeah.
And I think there's something, one can't be moralistic about it. It's another experience of our time. It's an image of our times. And I think there were times when people sat endlessly in the 18th century for portraits. Now they make their own portraits. I'm not going to be moralistic about it, but it is, as Wim said, quite interesting. But you know, when you talked earlier about, in response to what I said about the unheimlich or the uncanny, as Freud, it was translated, but of course it does mean, and he gives you a long description of being the unhomely, of being displaced. I think, to go back to what you were saying, when you talk to us about the optics and the physics of what you've made, the interesting thing that interested me there was that these objects are indeed liminal objects because they are halfway or somewhere between painting and sculpture. In fact, their liminality has an art historical generic issue or generic problem, that the filled space in front of you, which is often the space of painting where the depth is created by perspective within, now that filled space is on the surface and the depth is beyond it. This seems to me not only, and convincingly as you made it, a problem of the structure, the optics, the physics of the issue, but it is also a problem of time. Where does time lurk in the object? Is time a form of exteriority? We live through time and language. We, in fact, live through language as it passes our persons in time. But as you were speaking, I was beginning to think, what does this do for the temporality of self-recognition? Who am I as a person mediated by an object which is partly painting and partly sculpture, and I am now being addressed by this strange hybrid moment. I'm not being addressed by two different art forms. I'm being addressed by the hybridization, the liminality, the translation of these art forms. And it's this translatability that I think is not only central to that practice of the mirror works, but it is also, if I might say it, the selfie is a sense of not simply wanting to see yourself replicated, but wanting to see yourself in different guises, in different moments of translation, in different places, in different times, with different people. The selfie is there to surprise yourself rather than simply to affirm yourself. And with this, I would just like to move on to the third issue, that I want to raise, which is the great works of art, of wax, the great material works created by the blood-red installations of these objects, which I see quite often as being great architectural mimesis. They're reflections of architecture within architecture. They're the innards of buildings. And on the other hand, they're partly the bier or the pallbearers of history at the same time. And that's, of course, my reading. I think these are deeply allegorical works. I think they're even more allegorical than the other two practices we've talked about. And I think that they are embedded not only in the psyche, but in questions of historical violence. And let me tell you why. Swayambha, shooting the corner, these are supposed to be enactments of self-manifesting or the self-made. Let me offer another reading of the self-made in the mode of historic transformation, in the mode of the bloodlands of history, as much as its edifices of power and luminosity. Enter this space hallowed by art and history. Floors of marble in a museum, in a great edifice, run like water and catch the sun's dying rays as they dip into a vaulted night, locked in these great rooms where your work stalks the night. From this prevailing darkness, the blood sun drags its red mass through the museum like a bleeding beast that drives itself mad looking for relief and release and some kind of exit, to say nothing of peace. The blood mass, beast and funeral pyre at once, traces the memory of madness and murder in the public domain, murder and mass in the name of the people. From one portal to another, blood follows itself across rooms and between doors. Let me not say between wars, because I see the space between the doors and the blood sun and the bloodlust as being connected with the wars. And let us not forget that since 9/11, the world has been at war in different ways, and most problematically, countries are at wars with their own people, their own minorities. Those who need protection in the edifice of history are now cast aside. The pyre drags itself restlessly like the bloodied beast from end to end, because, dare I say it, there is no sense of the beginning here. There is no sense of what Hannah Arendt called the important human grace of natality that gives us hope, that a child is born again. That notion of birth is less here than the trajectory from end to end. These transports of death, once set on their paths, leave deep tracks of terror in the most serene places of imperial and sovereign civility. The blood beast bear is the sun that rises at night, stalks the halls and blocks the light. No wall or door can block the night sweat of historical memory as it walks violence and death in a measured way, in a frantic and fevered way, through these halls and these galleries. These indeed are the great halls of history's vanity and its violence, carried on the back of the great sculptural funeral pyre.
First of all, beautifully said again, my dear friend. You know, Homi and I talk every single day, so we are in deep contact. And as you know, my dear Homi, this is this body of work is where my heart is. It's what I'm engaged in now. The notion, first of all, just formally, what's happening? Let me do what I did in the last two projects, describe what's happening. Soyun is a block of wax, big block of wax, 10 meters long, depending on the height of the door, but always at least 5 to 7 meters tall, and 3 to 4 meters wide. A block of wax cast as one solid thing, mounted on a rail, on a track that runs from one room to the next room in museums, and you'll see pictures of it on the screen. As it does so, the wax scrapes against the walls and pushes through, leaving a bloody residue. It's as if this object is the god or the half man, half beast being merciless, being flayed, all wound. You know, it of course refers to Rembrandt's great painting of 1655, I have written here, of the flayed ox. So it is the idea that this object just goes backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. It does nothing. It goes nowhere. It is looking to ooze, to fill the space with the physical materiality of this deep, dark, bloody red. It is infinitely horizontal. Now, one of the kind of themes, if you like, of modernism, let me divert slightly for a minute, is that modernism points onwards and upwards. It takes the Platonic notion of progress. It is still possible in modernism to believe in the light, the day, the forward. Brancusi's endless column, Brancusi's bird in space, I mean, or eventually, of course, the rocket up onward to the moon and beyond. I think our post-modern object isn't onward and upward. It's horizontal, and it may even be involuted. It may be doing this, turning in on itself, looking inward, in at itself, not Plato in the cave, looking out proverbially, but Freud in the cave, looking at that dark thing behind, over there, full of fear, full of what may come to pass. A recognition, if you like, that, to quote Bataille, René Girard and others, violence is logged in the heart of the sacred. That the sacred is no longer some pure, beautiful blue thing up there. It's dark, deep, red, hidden in the ground, vertical, nasty, and will come and bite us at every opportunity. The great thing about the Hinduism, the country we come from, is that it somehow recognizes that dark redness. Sadly, it's been taken to a horrid, nasty place in the last 4 or 5 years. But I celebrate the horizontality of the blood, if you like, that it goes onto the ground. It begins on the ground, it ends on the ground. The god is not blue. He's not up there untouchable. And he's not a she, he's a she in the ground, dark red, pouring out, always leveled out, liquid, in other words. So somewhere here, I've made a number of works from, Marcius at the Tate, which was a big, stretched, flayed, I use the word flayed, but really a big stretched PVC skin, to a work also made out of wax called My Red Homeland, which is a big block of steel that slowly revolves around like a witch churning a pot. Slow. It's very, very, very slow. So all these works with movement move very slowly. And it says nothing is happening. And that's what I'm interested in. Nothing and yet all of it. Anyway, voila.
That's right. And that's why you give it the title Triumph. And I think my role here as writer and conversant has been to bring in the question of time. As you have talked a lot about the question of space and optics and perception. And as we have to end here now, I just want to say that it seems that this backwards and forwards, which I have allegorized as the beer, the pallor of history, the deep red blood sun, as I described it, which is in the vault. You can't pull it out. There's no resolution. I have to say as we end, and I want to thank you, this is also a profound image of the transports of death. Whether they were part of the Holocaust, today they're part of the transports of refugees and migrants across the world. And what is actually the most poignant thing about these transports of death is that people got onto the Nazi trains, people got onto the refugee boats and trains, people walked, not because they knew that they would die. They knew that they would die, but because they thought there was a 1 in a million chance that they might live. And so there is this deep optimism that goes with profound disappointed hope. And that's where I think we should bring this to a close, thanking you for sharing your work and your thoughts with us. Thank you, Anish. Thank you, the Jaipur Literary Festival.
Thank you to Jaipur Literary Festival, but thank you above all, my dear, dear friend Homi, for your deeply poetic reflections, your willingness to enter and to participate at all kinds of levels, and your continual return to the most eminent question of time and its role in our transport. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Anish Kapoor. Thank you, Homi K. Baba. I wish we could have had you both here on the lawns of the front lawn in the Jaipur Literature Festival in Jaipur for this continued conversation, and we hope to do so in the future. We thank our celebration partner, Diageo, and thank you all for watching and being such a great audience. And remember, you can stay logged on and watch some of the other episodes at the Bar Hall. As you're aware, the cultural sector has been critically impacted by the pandemic. While we have all braced ourselves to embrace the new normal, we continue to struggle, and we love for your support. Any contribution would be welcome, so just press the contribute tag. Please remember to tweet using hashtag Jaipur Literature Festival 2021 and Twitter handle @JaipurLitFest. The festival and all of us are protected by Dettol. Stay safe, stay masked.
To all storytellers and story lovers, my name is Laksh Datta. I host and produce the Jaipur Bites podcast, where you can hear many of the amazing sessions from the Jaipur Literature Festival. I also produce a few other podcasts, as you can see right here. English, Hindi, fiction, non-fiction. If you see something you like, maybe you can take a screenshot of this right now. I'll give you a second. And tune in later. Find them on your favorite podcast app.